not muted yet? Okay, so my apologies for our technical difficulties. We had some problems on our end with our Zoom accounts. So it's all resolved now, I hope. And what do we say? So we will, I should now begin by, as usual, wishing you all good morning, good afternoon, good evening, or good whatever time of day it is, wherever you might be. And we will begin the class this morning with the prayers for going for refuge and bodhicitta. So please recite these prayers with great faith and devotion. O sanje chedan soge chonam la chancho bardo dane chapsum che dagi chenyengi pesanam gi drola penjer sanje drobar sho sanje chedan soge chonam la chancho bardo dane chapsum che dagi chunyen gi pesanam gi drola penjer sanje drobar sho sanje chedan sogi chonam la chancho bardo dane chapsum che dagi chunyen gi pesanam gi drola penjer sanje drobar sho. Until enlightenment I go for refuge to the Buddha, Dharma, and the sublime Sangha. By the merit of my listening to the Dharma, may I reach Buddhahood to benefit beings. Until enlightenment I go for refuge to the Buddha, Dharma, and the sublime Sangha. By the merit of my listening to the Dharma, may I reach Buddhahood to benefit beings. Until enlightenment I go for refuge to the Buddha, Dharma, and the sublime Sangha. By the merit of my listening to the Dharma, may I reach Buddhahood to benefit beings. Semchen tamje dewa dan dewe judan dembar jurje donga dan donga ji judan rawa jurje donga mebe dewa tamba tam min rawa jurje nyerin shadan itang rawe tanyon shembola nebar jurje. May all sentient beings be happy and have the causes of happiness. May they be free of suffering and the causes of suffering. May they never be parted from the highest joy, which is free of suffering. May they dwell in the great equanimity, free of attachment or hatred for those near or far. In the Dharma Expanse Palace of Akanishta, the essence of all Buddhas of the 3 times who shows me directly my mind is Dharmakaya. I prostrate to the glorious exalted Guru. Please bless me and all beings that our minds become the Dharma. Please bless us that the Dharma become the path. Please bless us that the path dispel confusion. Please bless us that confusion arise as wisdom. So I'd like to ask you to now please think to yourselves that we must bring all of our mothers, all sentient beings throughout space, to the state of true and lasting happiness, the state of complete and perfect Buddhahood. And in order to do this, we must engage in listening, contemplation, and meditation. And of these, we have to listen first. So please listen to the Dharma today with this motivation of bodhicitta. The Dharma that we are listening to is the Treasury of Abhidharma by Vasubandhu, as explained by the 9th Karmapa Wangchuk Dorje in his commentary Youthful Play. And of the 8 chapters of the commentary, of the 8 chapters of the Treasury, we are discussing the 8th area, teachings on the absorptions, which begins with a discussion of the absorptions, which we have already completed. And so we are today finishing up with the summary of the treatise. And in the summary of the treatise, there are the 2 parts: the discussion about how long the teachings will remain, which we discussed yesterday. And today we have come to the actual summary of the treatise itself, which is on page 580 of the book, Jewels from the Treasury. So, but before we begin, as often happens, there are a couple of questions. And so the first question here reads, the other day you talked about the 2 obscurations presented in the Abhidharma as being obscurations of afflictions and cognitive obscurations. That actually is with regard to the Mahayana. In area 6, it talks about the obscurations of afflictions, the obscurations of liberation, or the obscurations of absorption. So is this the latter the same as the cognitive obscurations in the Abhidharma? So in the Abhidharma, generally when we talk about it, the most important, or the primary objective of the Great Exposition, as with all the foundation schools, is to eliminate the things that prevent you from achieving liberation. And when we think about what prevents us from achieving liberation, it's the afflictions. So the afflictions are what we in the Mahayana often call the afflictive obscurations. This term does appear in some Great Exposition texts. In fact, there's a discussion of this at the very beginning of the Jewels from the Treasury. But in general, we just talk about them as the kernels and so forth. The term afflictive obscurations is primarily used in the Mahayana. Now, with regard to the cognitive obscurations, which in the what do we say? In the Great Vehicle, we also have the cognitive obscurations, which are primarily dualistic thinking. So thinking there's a difference between the subject, the perceiving or apprehending subject, and the apprehended object, thinking of them as being different. So this is not necessarily an affliction. It is ignorance, but it's unafflicted ignorance. Instead, we call this cognitive obscuration in the Mahayana. The term cognitive obscuration is also used in the Great Exposition, but with a different meaning. And there, what it primarily means are the obscurations that prevent a Buddha from achieving omniscience, which is, of course, also the characteristic of the Mahayana, but there's a different conception of what they mean. And there, it's not taught to be, in the Great Exposition, here in the context of the Great Exposition, it's not taught to be that obscuration of dualistic thought and so forth. So the terms also comes up in the Great Exposition, but with a different meaning. And then there are also the obscurations to absorption, which here are primarily taught as being desire realm, the pleasure-seeking, malice, sleep, and so forth, the 5 obscurations that we spoke about in the last chapter. And this term also comes up in the Mahayana, where actually they're often taught about more obscurations for absorption for bodhisattvas on the high levels, the obscurations to achieving the Vajra-like samadhi and so forth. So the basic point is that you have the same terms that are used with different meanings in different schools. And each time they're used with a purpose. So it's kind of our job as we're studying to kind of think about what is the context of this particular school that I'm studying. So right now, when we're studying the Great Exposition, we have to say, afflictive obscurations in this Context means the kernels, the 98 kernels. When you go to the Mahayana, then you realize, oh, afflictive obscurations are similar to what they're taught in the Great Exposition, but it's the kernels and their afflicted imprints also. So there's a difference, and so you have to keep those differences in mind. Now, at this point, if you haven't studied a text like the Ornament of Clear Realization or so forth, then you wouldn't necessarily know what those differences are, but it's important now to think what you are learning, the details of what you are learning are particular to the Great Exposition tradition, as we will go through in just a moment. So it's important to keep that in mind. And it's also important to mind that because they're kind of particular, there are also many different times when the same term is used with a slightly different meaning. You have a list of something that's given as one set of qualities or one set of mental factors or one set of something in one text and a slightly different one in another. And this is just because they're different presentations, different ways to come to understand the basic problems. There are things that prevent us from achieving liberation. Those are the afflictions. That's what we need to get rid of. Especially if we're in the Great Exposition, that's what we primarily need to eliminate. And there are things that prevent us from achieving deep samadhi, and those need to be eliminated. But exactly how they're presented are differences. That's okay. It's just different presentations. The Buddha, in fact, the Buddha himself taught these things differently in different contexts. So that was the first question. And then the other question from another question said, I understand from the last chapters that the jhanas or absorptions mean an increasing level of withdrawal from the senses. And even an arhat cessation seems to entail this, or does it not? It does, actually. I find this hard to understand. So at least so maybe it is due to my poor level of meditation, but I feel that the effect of meditation is the opposite. The senses get clearer, although less dominating. Maybe this is a difference in the Mahayana approach, but even within the Abhidharma, I seem to remember from chapter 1 that the 5 sensory consciousness can only be in the present, and they are therefore non-conceptual. So why withdrawal from the senses if it is just the mind consciousness that causes the problems? So basically, this is another point where we have to understand the differences between the two schools. Also, what are these differences? Well, when we're thinking about what do we say? When we're thinking about meditation, what do we want to do in meditation? So what is the goal of meditation? How do you want to do it? There are different styles of meditation. And because there are different styles of meditation with slightly different goals, I mean, we all want to achieve liberation for all the Buddhist schools, but what that means is understood differently. So the meditations come out differently. So for this reason, in the sutra approach, there's a lot of emphasis on performing the dhyana meditations, and then somewhat on the formless, but primarily the dhyana. They're considered generally a little bit more important. And I think as we went through the last couple of chapters, you can understand a bit about why. And these do entail withdrawing the senses from the world. Now, it's not that these sensory consciousnesses are thought-free or not, because that's not as big a deal in the Great Exposition tradition as it is in the Sutra tradition as it is in the Vajrayana, in particular Mahamudra and Dzogchen. So in the Sutra tradition, we have to remember, and particularly in the Great Exposition as presented here, the point of meditation is to be able to withdraw your mind and keep from being distracted so you can rest one-pointedly with some of the strengths that the dhyana meditations give to your mind. Part of this is being one-pointed. And when you withdraw from the senses, then there are less things to distract you. So this is the way. In fact, we have a Tibetan saying that the listeners look down to tame their minds, the outsiders look up to see Brahma, and the Vajra eyes gaze straight ahead. So it's like even from the beginning steps of meditation, the point is to kind of avoid the things that are going to distract you. And so when you withdraw from the senses, then you're not distracted by the sensory world, and then you can engage in very fine analysis. And that analysis is conceptual. You're looking at the universal characteristics of when you're in the undefiled. The undefiled meditation is looking at the universal characteristics of suffering, of impermanent suffering, and so forth, all the way up to the accomplishment and deliverance of the path, the 16 aspects. So for that reason, the meditation is different. You're withdrawing from the world to engage in this somewhat conceptual, from a Mahayana standpoint, it's a conceptual meditation on the 16 aspects. In the Vajrayana tradition, it's different, and in particularly when you're thinking about Mahamudra and Dzogchen, and probably also, I don't really know enough about the Sankhya tradition of the path and its result to know exactly what they do in that, because I haven't studied it. But my understanding is that it's essentially the same in essence as the Dzogchen and the Mahamudra, and so in Mahamudra and Dzogchen, you are not withdrawing from the world. Instead, you are using what arises in your senses to be part of your meditation. As in the Mahamudra tradition, we have the saying of, appearances are mind, mind is emptiness, emptiness is spontaneously present. And so the appearances, we see that they're mind, that mind is emptiness. And so you can't really identify emptiness anywhere other than the appearances that occur in your mind. The appearances that you see are actually in your mind, and then you look at that to see what is its nature. You see it's empty, and you realize that the mind and all appearances are empty and illusory. And so the point is not to block yourself from any experience, but to actually fully understand the nature of the experiences in order to overcome not the afflictive obscurations, but the cognitive obscurations. For when you overcome the cognitive obscurations, the afflictive obscurations are naturally also just naturally fall away. So they're the different meditations. So when we are engaging in meditation from the Mahamudra tradition, I mean, I'm saying this because I'm more familiar, but I think it's similar in the other Vajrayana traditions, we're not withdrawing from the world. We're learning how to let our mind rest within complete and total ease of just letting it be. And so we're taught in this style from the very beginning. So the fact that we're having different experiences, even as beginners in meditation, is just a sign that we're on a different path with a different end result. So we have to do that. And we also at the same time shouldn't think to ourselves that we are doing something better or something worse. On a certain level, I mean, what makes ours better, if it's anything, is our motivation of wanting to achieve Buddhahood. But that's no reason to look down on what the other traditions do, because they're also extremely valuable, and there are people for whom those teachings are really important and really helpful. And so it's just absolutely wonderful that these teachings have been, of all of the schools of Buddhism, have been preserved to the present day, and people are still practicing them and so forth. So that is the that is the main point of thinking about that. So those are the two questions for today. And so I think we are ready now to go back to the text itself. Jewels from the Treasury. All right, so we got to the point, the actual summary of the treatise itself, which is on, now I've forgotten the page number, even though I said it a moment ago. The page number is 580. I almost said 680. There aren't 680 pages in the book, are there? Unless I wrote a lot of endnotes. Okay, the actual summary of the treatise itself has 3 topics: how the treatise was composed, confessing mistakes, and advice to be careful. So how the treatise was composed. I mostly have explained this Abhidharma according to the Kashmiri exposition. So this is Vasubandhu saying, this is how I've taught the text. This is what I've used as my sources. And what is he used for as the sources? It's the Kashmiri exposition school. And it's mostly, so not entirely, but mostly. So that's implying that he's also included other teachings, some from the Darshtantika school, some from the Sutra school, some from and the Sutra school, of course, came out of the Darshtantika, and often they're talked about as being simultaneous, synonymous, and also some from the Aparantaka Great Exposition. So, as Wanchuk Dorje says, is the Abhidharma explained in this treatise the Abhidharma that the teacher explained, you ask? Well, actually, this is a difficult question. I mean, when you look at the Tibetan Kanjur, and look for the teachings on the Abhidharma. They're not included in the Kanjur itself. What they are is they're the teachings of the Buddha that the Buddha actually gave in the sutras, and then assembled by later by arhats. So I, Vasubandhu, have explained this dharma of the treasury of Abhidharma partially according to the tradition of the Sutra school and the Aparantaka Great Exposition. So these are the two main other sources that Vasubandhu uses as his sources. And in fact, many people say, actually it's not many people, it's generally accepted as fact, that well, maybe I should say this in just a moment. However, I mostly have explained this Abhidharma according to the school of the Kashmiri Great Exposition. So it's the Kashmiri Great Exposition school. And the reason is, and I think that this translation is one valid way of translating the Tibetan in Wangchuk Dorje's commentary, if you don't actually think about what he's really trying to say. In Tibetan, you don't necessarily have to use personal pronouns in sentences, and sometimes they change depending on the change whom they're referring to without using a pronoun to show it. And so I got caught in this stupid translator mistake. So it means, actually, because it was explained in Kashmir strictly according to the exposition. So here what we mean is that's the exposition. So the Buddha taught everything that is in this, or almost everything that's in this, except for some things that were kind of reasoned out by arhats later. He taught it all in different sutras, and then it was, all compiled by Mahakashyapa first, and then the other arhats, and then there's 7 arhats who wrote the treatises, the 7 great treatises, and then 700 arhats gathered in Kashmir and wrote the Great Exposition. So the Great Exposition is the main source. Now that became a very well-known treatise all over India. I've mentioned it a few times. It became well-known. So there are other exposition schools. But the people who stayed in Kashmir developed their own tradition of explanation. So it's called the Kashmiri Great Exposition, or the Kashmiri Exposition here in the verse. So basically what we're saying is that he's teaching according to the Great Exposition compiled by the arhats in the tradition of the Kashmiri Panditas. The reason why he is doing this is because when he studied the Dharma, he first studied the Abhidharma in that tradition. And so when he's writing this treatise, he felt that because he had received it out of gratitude for the teachers who taught him, he needed to respect that tradition. And so he wrote it according to their teachings. However, there are some points that he thought were not logical. And so for those points, he also took the teachings of some from the Aparantaka Great Exposition School. Now, Aparantaka just basically means all the other areas in India. So it's like it kind of means the Great Exposition teachers who were not in Kashmir. And also, but more from the Sutra school. Perspective of the Sutra school. So as we went through the text, we noticed that there were a lot of sort of skeptical comments where he would say, it is claimed or it is said, saying that this is what the Great Exposition school says, but there are other positions that are maybe more reasonable. And so those are primarily from the Sutra school. So that is how the treatise was composed. And then confessing mistakes. And this couplet also has a stupid translator mistake. Any mistakes herein are solely mine, not ours. The sages are the authority in Dharma. I was being too clever when I translated this, and I looked at the Sanskrit and I noticed that it had a first-person singular thing for ours instead of mine. And I was going, why does it say mine in the Tibetan and ours in the Sanskrit? Well, I better follow the Sanskrit because that's the original that I thought of. But then it actually turns out that in Sanskrit, if the singular doesn't fit in the verse, sometimes you can use the plural and vice versa. And so it was a stupid translator mistake. It should be any mistakes herein in this treatise are solely mine, Vasubandhu's. The sages, that is the Buddha, are the authority in Dharma. So any mistakes in words or meaning herein, that is in this treatise, are solely my, Vasubandhu's, the author's, own mistakes and errors. The Dharma that the Buddha taught is valid. It is authoritative. We can understand it. But because those people who later teach it are not necessarily Buddhas, then it's possible that there might be mistakes. However, it is not a great wonder that someone like me would confuse the words and meaning, explaining the meaning of the scriptures. In other words, if Vasubandhu himself, looking at himself and seeing his own falsity, there's someone like him, how could he possibly understand everything that the Buddha was teaching? And actually, we can, in the Mahayana tradition, we consider Vasubandhu an 8th level bodhisattva. So if an 8th level bodhisattva is feeling that way about himself in comparison to the Buddha, where does that leave ordinary beings like me and like all of us? So, if there is, then we should take the meaning that is, who should we rely on as an authority? The sages, the Buddhas. The Bhagavan sages and their children, the arhats who have the eye of Dharma, are the authority in the words and meaning of the true Dharma. So the Buddhas and their children, that includes people like Shariputra and Maudgalyana, Mahakashyapa, Ananda, Rahula, and so forth, all of the people who have the great arhats who upheld the teaching, those who are named, those who are not named, but who also were great arhats who understood the teachings, such as Aryachema, and all of those other great arhats, both monks and nuns and lay people, but primarily monks and nuns. So they're the ones who are in the authority and the words and the meaning of the true Dharma. So this completes the 8th area called Teachings on the Absorptions from the Verses of the Treasury of Abhidharma. We've now gone through the entire root text, the 8th area of the text. We've got a few verses left. So this completes in the commentary that gives a colophon for this chapter, saying this completes the explanation of the 8th area called Teachings on the Absorptions from the explanation of the verses of the Treasury of Abhidharma, called the Essence of the Ocean of Abhidharma, the words of those who know and love, explaining the youthful play, opening the eyes of Dharma, and the chariot of easy practice. So this is the end of the text on the 8th area. So now we come to the closing advice. Advice to be careful. So this has 2 points, and the first is the dangers of carelessness. And it reads, the teacher, the eye of the world has been closed. The beings who are witness have mostly perished. Those who haven't seen thatness, those who are bad logicians and headstrong, have confounded the teachings. So the teacher is the Buddha. The Buddha passed into nirvana. And when he passed into nirvana, when the Buddha is present, it's like he's the eye who allows the world to see the nature of things and the nature of samsara, and to find the way to teach us in the path that leads unerringly to liberation. And he's passed into nirvana, so it's as if that eye of the world has been closed. The beings who are witness have mostly perished. So the great beings like Shariputra, Mahakashyapa, all of the other great arhats who were there, who saw, and who heard the Buddha teach, and who realized the meaning of their teachings, have mostly perished. Those who haven't seen thatness, so people who haven't seen the nature of things as it is, those who are bad logicians, intellectuals who misunderstand, and headstrong, they have a little bit too much pride or stubbornness, they have confounded the teachings. So what happened historically is that the Buddha taught, the great elders upheld the teachings, but after a period of time, people came up with ideas that didn't really fit with the teachings of the Buddha. And so afterwards, there's the first council where the Buddha's teachings were compiled, and then there arose some disputes. Well, what is or what isn't the teaching? Then there are some people who said, well, we should also follow 10 additional rules. And then there had to be a second council to deal with that. And then later, there was a council, a third council, where other people had different ideas, and a big problem about what language should they recite the Abhidharma, and should they recite it in the common languages or in the Prakrit, the languages such as Pali, or should they recite it in Sanskrit, or should they do it in the really colloquial, the kind of, what do we say? In Latin, they would have called these vulgar languages, the really, the basic everyday languages of people like Brahmsa and Pishachi. Should we teach in those languages? So there's a big debate. And as a result of that, Buddhism split into 18 different schools. So there are big conflicts. People misunderstood the teachings. So the one self-born and those who cherish his teachings have passed into the supreme peace. There is no refuge or counsel for beings, and the stains that slay qualities run rampant in this at their leisure. So the Buddha, who was self-born, all those who cherish his teachings have passed, those great beings who upheld the teachings, have passed into the supreme peace of nirvana, and now we are left without anyone to provide us refuge or advice. And because of this, the stains that slay qualities, all our own afflictions and other mental difficulties that overcome our qualities, run rampant in this life or in this world at their pleasure. And so, as we know that for the sage's teachings, it's as if the last breaths now rasp in the throat, that this is a time when the stains have great strength. So we know that now, for the teachings of the Buddha, it's like they're in their death throes. It's like it's almost over. And we have to remember that this was especially Vasubandhu wrote this in the 4th century, which is almost 1,000 years after the Buddha taught that his teachings would last. So he was looking at this at the end of the time and seeing the conduct and so forth of all the people around him and thinking it's like the teachings are about to perish. So this is a time when the afflictions have grown even stronger. And so this is the situation, the dangers of carelessness. Stains come up because we are being careless. So to read Wanchuk Tordu's commentary. As he taught his disciples the distinction between what is the path that leads to liberation and what is not, the teacher, the Bhagavan, is like the eye of the world. He teaches everything as it is and teaches us what we should do and not do. That eye has been closed. The Buddha, he has passed into nirvana. And it is as if worldly folk have been left sightless. It's as if we no longer have any eyes. The beings other than the Buddha who are witness to the Dharma, such as the noble beings, such as Kashyapa, have mostly passed into nirvana and perished. So blinded by ignorance, those ordinary individuals who have not seen the thatness of Dharma, who have not seen its true meaning, its true nature, and who are bad logicians and headstrong, they follow pseudo-reasoning. They're thinking, but their thinking isn't quite right. They're not relying on the teaching, on the teacher of scriptures, the Buddha's sutras. And so because they're thinking without really looking to see, do they have a source? They've confounded the teachings of the teacher through exaggeration and denigration. So basically exaggerating some aspects, making them actually more prominent than they are, or saying more, taking from one thing that was said in some scripture and then expounding on it in ways that actually go beyond the actual limits of the teachings, or denying things that are actually taught by the Buddha. So the one, that is the Bhagavan, who is self-born, that means he arose self-arisen, self-born. He didn't need any other teaching in his lifetime, having found wisdom in his last existence without anyone to explain the scripture. So this is an explanation of self-born. And those who cherish his, that is the self-born Buddha's teachings, have passed away without any remainder of the aggregates into the supreme peace that is superior to nirvana. So they pass away, and when they pass away, the 5 defiled aggregates all cease. When you're an arhat, this is what happens. First you have the nirvana with remainder, when you have still have the defiled aggregates, and then when you pass away, the continuum of the 5 defiled aggregates ceases because there's no cause for it to continue. And at that point, the arhat enters the cessation of nirvana. So without the Buddha or his children, his direct disciples, there is no refuge or counsel who can give correct instructions for beings. And the stains of bad views and so forth that are the cause that slays the previously explained qualities and makes the teachings disappear. So when we have those stains in ourselves, this is not a stain, it's not outside, it's our own stains in ourselves. When we have those stains, pride, overconfidence, being headstrong and so forth, that eliminates our qualities. So these are very common. They run rampant in this world, and they're very common at their pleasure or indiscriminately. It's like they just go anywhere. There's nothing that can stop them. And so as we who are intelligent know that for the sage's teachings, the teachings of the Buddha, it is as if, for example, the last breaths that at the approach of the time of death now rasp in the throat and will not remain long. So it's when you hear that that death rattle in someone's throat. You know that they only have a short time left in this lifetime. And similarly with the teachings of the Buddha, looking at how it is, it's like, how can it continue unless we do something about it? So as we know that this is a time when the stains of bad views and so forth have great strength, and follow the forthcoming advice. So what we need to follow the advice, and what is the advice? The advice to rely on carefulness, or perhaps you could say the advice to apply carefulness. All those who want freedom, be careful. This is really important. We have to be very careful about ourselves. In this manner, all those who fervently want the freedom of nirvana, be careful in everything. This is the heartfelt advice. This is the root of all virtuous dharmas, in the words of the Bhagavan, the Buddha. Carefulness is a place of deathlessness. Carelessness is a place of death. Those who are careful will not die. The careless always die. So if we want to avoid the sufferings of death and then the unavoidable sufferings of rebirth that would follow upon it, then we have to be careful. Being careful, what does that mean? It means really valuing the teachings. First of all, of course, we have to want freedom. It says, all those who want freedom, be careful. So we have to develop that wish to achieve liberation from the samsara, that wish to really, what do we say? The wish to, you have to have the wish to really free ourselves from this, to really escape suffering, to recognize that there is escape, and that there is liberation, that it is possible, that there are steps. There are many people who have done it in the past, and even to this day, there are people who are doing it. But we have to want to do it. And if we want to do it, then the main thing we have to do is be careful. Being careful means to make sure that we don't slip up and do something that we shouldn't do. And this comes from really valuing the teachings. So we need to value the teachings and so forth. We need to be careful. So the meaning of these words is explained in a letter to a friend by Nagarjuna. A place of nectar, carefulness, but a place of death is carelessness, the sage declared. Thus, to develop virtuous qualities, you should always act with respect and care. So if you are nectar here, it's actually the Sanskrit word amrita, in Tibetan it's dudzi. And this word actually is one that is sometimes, of course, we use it to refer to like the nectar of the gods and so forth, amrita. But it also means deathless. So if you are careful, then you can avoid the suffering of dying and then the suffering of future births. And even for born in a higher realm for 1 lifetime or 100 lifetimes, eventually if we're just letting the winds of karma blow us about, eventually we're going to be blown into the lower realms where we'll experience intolerable suffering. That can only happen if we're careless now, so we must be careful of that. So we should always have respect and care. So respect can also be thought of, that the same Tibetan word can also be understood to mean dedication, like thinking, I've got to do this. It's really important. I need to do it. And then care means making sure that you're really doing it. This is the basis of really developing the qualities. Or maybe faith is the basis, but you can't just have faith. If you have faith and you are careless, then you're still not going to go very far. You have to have faith, and you also have to be careful to do what you should do and avoid what you shouldn't do. Practice abundant virtue, completely give up wrongdoing. So it also says in the individual liberation, this is the Pratimoksha Sutra, which is the text that lists all of the bhikshu vows. It says there, venerable ones, aging and death will truly come, and the teachings of the teacher will be destroyed. So the venerable should practice the yogas of carefulness. The enlightenment of the Bhagavan, Arhat, completely perfect Buddha, and the virtuous dharmas that are compatible with that, the factors of enlightenment, are all attained through carefulness. And so it's basically, if we are not careful, we will not achieve even the qualities of the path, let alone the qualities of liberation. So thus it is said. The manner of completing the exposition has 2 points, teaching the completing words. This is the colophon. This completes the verses on the Treasury of Abhidharma composed by Vasubandhu. And the translator's colophon. translated into Tibetan by the Indian abbot Jinamitra and the Tibetan translator Bande Kawa Paltsek, and then corrected and finalized. Bande Kawa Paltsek is probably, when we talk about Tibetan translators, who do we talk about? Well, for Kaji, we talk about Marpa the translator. We might talk about the great translator Rinchen Sampo, or Khazul, Verochana. These are the really well-known translators. But another one who's also pretty well-known is Bande Kawa Paltsek, who was one of the first 7 Tibetans to take the Bhikshu vows. They wanted to test, could Tibetans actually hold vows? It was unclear at that point in the 8th century, 7th century. So they had 7 people, the 7 men for testing, who became Bhikshus. And so he, so he was one of these 7. And this translation into Tibetan, translated in the 8th century, the beginning of the 8th century, and now, 1,300 years later, it is still extremely clear, still extremely understandable. It's like brilliant translation. When you compare it to the Sanskrit, it's like nothing is left out, nothing is missing. There's nothing that is rendered unclearly or ambiguously. It's just like a real model of translation. And Bande Kawa Paltsek also translated the Auto commentary and Yashomitra's commentary, and those two are both exactly the same. Extremely clear, brilliant translations. Bande Kawa Paltsek also did the first translation of the Way of the Bodhisattva. Now, that was according to a different manuscript than the Sanskrit manuscript than the one that has later become the standard. But his was the basis for later translations of the Way of the Abhidharma. He also participated in the translation of the first version of the Manjushri Namasangiti, the chanting the names of Manjushri. It was translated by Chokro Lui Gyaltsen and Bande Kawa Paltsek under the direction of Padmasambhava. And when you look at the later translations, even if they don't necessarily credit that earlier translation, there's a lot in that original translation that is still in the more common translations that were produced several hundred years later. And so this is, I mean, he's like one of the greatest of translators. I think I'm going on about him as a translator just to sort of say, just like my awe. I mean, my own translation in comparison to his is just like nothing. And so, I mean, it's like for all the different translators whose works I've really looked at, and probably he's one of the ones whose works I've looked at more. It's like he's the one whom I have really, what do we say, come to appreciate the most. So the Bande Kawa Paltsek, maybe not a household name for people in the West, but someone who was an early translator, but incredibly important translator. He also translated many sutras, or participated in the editing of many sutras, and so really an amazing translator. So now to say a few words about the reason for composing this work being the Wangchuk Dorje's commentary on Vindhya's lofty slopes of the 2 accumulations from the kushu stalks of the powers and other qualities flourish with utter brilliance of youthfulness. Great sage and master of the spring, please grant me refuge. So this is speaking about his guru, Shamar Kunchok Bang, and so talking about him being on Vindhya, which is one of the great mountains in India. The kushu stalks, kushu is the type of grass that the Buddha originally used to as a seat under the Bodhi tree when he achieved enlightenment. So Sagara's sons, the beings of degenerate times, are stained and sullied by their various views. At once you cleanse them with the natural Ganges. Master Bhagirath, grant me protection. So here, this is a reference to common or an ancient Sanskrit or Indian tale of or history, that there were the sons of Sagara. There were 600 sons of Sagaras who were making a lot of problems. They were stained by their views and so forth. And so the master Bhagiratha the Bhagirath, then loosed the Ganges from the Himalayas and washed away the suns and all of their stains. Upon the snowland's eastern mountain face of merit, the fully waxing light of good virtue from Kunja Yenlak, Shakyamuni's true disciple. So here he's comparing Kunja Yenlak to the moon. So Kunja Yenlak is like a true disciple of the Buddha Shakyamuni, conquers at once all the darkness on the three levels. So on the three levels, it's not specified, but it could be above, below, and on the ground. So what need have we of tales of how in Magadha the Shakyan prince bestowed the three Dharma wheels on the three families? The perfect Buddha is here and truly present as the wish-fulfilling jewel. In a sense, the master, Kunja Bang, he's as a Buddha himself. It's as if we don't need the Buddha Shakyamuni because we've got a Buddha in Kunja Yenlak, in the Guru. Additionally, my master, the great Victoria, renowned as the victorious over all. So this is a reference to the second person from whom Wangchuk Dorji received the teachings on Abhidharma, Namgyal Drapa, or Vijaya Kirti, which means renowned as victorious, is the most venerable in the snow land and as rich as peace and tameness as Upali. So Upali was the monk who, the bhikshu who was renowned for his knowledge and his practice of the Vinaya discipline. If with his acumen in proofs and rebuttals he destroys the logic of the six extremist teachers, what need is there to talk of lesser opponents? Thus in debate he is truly Dharmakirti. So Namgyal Drapa is like, is so sharp in his logic, he's like the greatest of the Buddhist logicians, Dharmakirti. So from both my master's kindness, I have not been stricken by the poisons of the objects nor distracted by desire's illusory dance. I could take the burden on to free my mother. So because of the kindness of his gurus, Kunja Bang and Namgyal Drapa, he was able to avoid being distracted by external objects or by the desire on the inside. So he's taking on the burden to free my mothers, the Bodhisattva's burden to free all of his mothers, and have faith in the ways of the Buddha's teachings. Because he has received these teachings and found them to be authoritative, valid, trustworthy, he has faith in them. The friend of the day, the master of the Shakyas, the knowing the basket of the Abhidharma to be the discernment that will stop his afflictions, thus taught it to his gatherings of students. This is speaking about how the Abhidharma first came about. The friend of the day is a metaphor for the sun, which is again, or is not a metaphor, it is an expression that refers to the sun as a metaphor for the Buddha. The master of the Shakyas, the Buddha was born in the Shakya clan, and he understood the nature of the basket to be the medicine or the prajna that will stop afflictions. So he taught it to his students. These students were these teachings were in bits and pieces which Shariputra and the rest, the other of the 7 arhats, compiled into the 7 treatises. Afterwards, 700 arhats at Mount Vindhya wrote great treatises explaining the meaning of the 7 treatises. So this is the explanation of the composition of the Great Exposition. Vasubandhu collected all the precious jewels of their meaning in this treasury. So he took all the jewels of their meaning. Actually, this is the line that I kind of used for the book that contains my translation of both Vasubandhu's verses and Wangchuk Dorje's commentary jewels from the treasury, like taking the greatest of the jewels from there. Then he himself wrote his own commentary. Vasubandhu himself wrote his own commentary, and the son of a lord, Prince Yashomitra. And actually, I think it's probably the son of a Buddha, and it's not Prince, but so much as Jinamitra, the Bodhisattva, Yashomitra, and the great scholar Purnavardhana and other great Indian scholars wrote their explanation. So they're the great Indian masters. So there is the chariot of the practice lineage, the treatise that is called the Springtime Cow. So there is the great treatise called the Springtime Cow by Karmapa Miki Dorje. And so this is the basis on which, this is the text that Wangchuk Dorje himself studied. Upon the repeated requests of my master, great Namgyal Drapa, and from students, Doju Gyatso and others. So the Springtime Cow is extremely long and hard for beginners. So Namgyal Drapa and other students asked him to write this treatise. For the benefit of future followers, I've combined all aspects of these explications and explained in this youthful play without any vagrant hearsay or my own fabrications. He's not just saying what he's heard or thinks, but what he has come to certainty about. He's not making anything up. When I was 18, I received the full and complete explanation and transmission from Mikyu's commentary, as well as the Treasury of Abhidharma from the omniscient, glorious Lama Kuntrut Yenlak. Then the great master trained me thoroughly in the difficult points and dispelled my doubts about the root and the commentary and the explanation. That would be about the root, of course, the root verses, and the commentary could well be in the auto-commentary, and the explanation would be Mikyu Dorje's, so that I have attained full mastery of the meaning of the words. So he's not claiming full mastery of the actual meaning, but of the meaning of the words. But if there may be any contradictions or mistakes or faults here, and I ask all those who have the eyes of Dharma for their patience, because it's possible he might have made mistakes, so please be forgiving. If any of my followers should wish to gain the wish-fulfilling jewel of freedom from the vast oceans of the Abhidharma, embark upon this ship of youthful play. May the rich nectar from the stamens, the blossoming white lotus of this virtue, nourish with deathless sustenance the bees who long for the teachings of the glorious Dakpo. Bees are a metaphor that often come up, and it's like they're diligent, they're hardworking, and so it's like really good that they're always working hard to make their honey. So we should be the same, as diligent as bees are in making their honey. We should be so diligent in achieving the sweet nectar of the Dharma. From now on, until I reach enlightenment's essence, I ask the great master, the perfect Buddha, this here is referring to Kuntrut Bang, to dwell in separately in my heart's drop, that is in the center of his heart. May the nectar of my speech spread to all beings. May it benefit all people. May they master unmistakenly and entirely the meaning of the baskets and the tantras, that is of the sutras, the Vinaya, the Abhidharma, and the tantras, have the intelligence to teach, write, and debate, and strive to listen, contemplate, and meditate all day and all night. I'm not sure that there's much need for explanation there. May this essence of the ocean of Abhidharma that opens our eyes to the Dharma, the place for clear-minded youths to play, spread all over all the world and blaze. So when, during his second uncountable eon on the path of learning, the teacher, our Buddha Shakya, the unequaled king of the Shakyas himself, this means the Bodhisattva who would later become the Buddha Shakyamuni, was the merchant Prajnabhadra. He formed his resolve in front of the Tathagata Kuntrut Yenlak himself. So he served a Buddha who was named Kuntrut Yenlak, who had arisen as the essence of all aspects of the body, speech, and mind of all the victors, and was the sole refuge, support, land, or the basis, the ground, and friend for all wanderers who could fill space. I received this from the full moon of the face of the Guru. That would be the, of course, referring to comparing his Buddha, his Guru, to the light of the moon, whose cool light gives relief to all wanderers. And that is the omniscient, glorious Kuntrut Shakya Chokye Tsoe Bang, the fifth Shama Rinpoche, as well as from him, whose moon of wisdom that knows all there is to know is full and shines as the light of the victorious in all directions that fills all limbs of the world. So as this refers to his teacher, Vijayakirti, the crown jewel of vows, diligence, and scholarship in this land of snow, the one who is without peer in teaching, writing, and debating is Vijayakirti. I place the stainless dust from these two masters' feet upon the crown of my head. So here he's teaching, he's making this as a prayer and paying homage to his teachers, and implicitly he's really teaching us how much we should treasure those great beings who continue to uphold the teachings and who share them with us, who teach them with us, and how important it is to really have complete faith and devotion in the teachings. The monk of the Shakyas, Palden Mipam Chiki Wanchuk Dorje Garwan Chole Namburyawe Nimbo, Shabda Tembe Nimbo, or by another name bestowed on him by the Kempo of Udayana, Padmasambhava, Vajrashvara. Vajrashvara is the Sanskrit that would be translated into Tibetan as Wangchuk Dorje. Ishvara is Wangchuk, and Vajra is, of course, Dorje. Began this at the age of 20 in the great place of practice, Shao Tiger Gate. I completed when called a 21-year-old in the second half of the month of the Pleiades and the sixth day of the waning phase. On the male tiger fire rat year 1576 in the solitary place of White Mountain Cave near the great Dharma wheel of Tupten Kung Karma Sumrat Jatsoling. The scribe was Bhikshu Anandaraja. So virtue, virtue, virtue. So this completes the explanations of the, the explanations of the, the explanations of the root text and the commentary. We had a question about this, actually. Please explain the use of the word dakpo. And dakpo, of course, refers to, let me get the book open. It's going to be easier to find that in there, I think. Well, what does it say? Where exactly are we finding the dakpo? Where did I see the word dakpo? Oh, the glorious dakpo. Yeah, so this is the line from that. Maybe I should share it. Once again, we'll go back there. So here's the word in question. Along the teachings of the glorious dakpo, excuse me, a double click doesn't help always. Whatever. Long for the teachings of glorious dakpo. So this would be the teachings of the dakpo lineage of the Kagyu lineages that have been passed down from Gampopa. That's what we mean by dakpo here. Okay, so that is taken care of. And so this is the end of this year's Abhidharma class. This is the third year of the Abhidharma class. And so perhaps some people would like me to redo the first one. We'll see about that. Next year, of course, I'd like to in the future, assuming that I'm still able, that I'm still on this earth and still healthy. At some point in the future, I'd like to do some more teachings of the texts that I have studied or worked on or translated. Actually, it's, what do we say? There's no guarantee about anything. We started this class in 2019 in Namo Buddha. And there we had, what was it, 20, 25 students? Something like that. I don't remember the exact numbers. Not only did we have those 20 students, actually 25 students, many of them are continuing to watch. And so this is really an excellent sign that you all have great desire to study the Dharma in more depth, to learn more about the Dharma, learn more about the Abhidharma. This is actually a really, I'm very pleased about it for that reason, that people are showing their interest in the Dharma. And then last year, because of the epidemic, we couldn't hold it in Nama Buddha. In terms of this course, actually, it was in some ways a good thing. Because we were forced to teach it over the internet. Last year we used YouTube, and it worked out pretty well. And then this year, we're doing it over Zoom and YouTube, which seems to have worked out pretty well. It's got some advantages over YouTube, some things that are a little bit more difficult and lead to 15-minute delays in the beginning of a class sometimes. But there's definitely a benefit to using Zoom. So whatever, but the fact that so many of us are actually still alive after 3 years in the middle of a pandemic is, we don't think about it. We don't remember it. We sort of assume, of course, we're still alive after 3 years. What else would have happened? Well, we would have died. That's what would have happened. And it could have happened much more easily than you think. I have known several people, mostly monks in Nepal, who have gotten very, very sick and nearly died from the coronavirus. And it could happen to any of us. And it might not even be coronavirus. So we have to keep that in mind, that we've actually, so that's in some sense, we have to celebrate that not only has it been 3 years, but we still have precious human bodies. We still have all the leisures and all the resources that allow us to think and study and contemplate the Dharma. This is just absolutely astounding that so many of us are able to do this from year to year. Not only that, now that we're doing this over the internet, we have a large group of students of Trungpa Rinpoches from around the world, some of whom I've known for, 20 years or longer. And we're all, not all of Rinpoche's students are still here, but the fact that those of us who are participating is just, astounding. And then there are people who I haven't known up to now, and people who I basically know as, either little pictures on Zoom or as, either little pictures on Zoom, or I know them as people who send me emails with questions. And that might seem like a small connection, but we're all still here. We're all still able to do this. And so we have this opportunity to continue studying, to continue listening, to continue contemplating, and to continue taking teachings and practicing and putting it into practice. So this is just absolutely amazing that we have this opportunity. We have to really appreciate that. I mean, we never think about it. Not usually. So this is what we really, it's important that we do this. We don't think about impermanence and what it does and what it means for our study. Well, it means that our study could end today or tomorrow. The fact that we've been able to continue for so long is just miraculous. So we have to use this opportunity while we do. And I've been really happy to see how many people have been following this teachings over the years and over the internet for the past couple of years. And there are many more people who will continue to listen or watch over YouTube. And the fact that people are listening to the end is a sign of your great commitment and your interest in learning this. And this is really to be celebrated. So I am really very appreciative to all of you who are listening for taking this opportunity, making the effort to get the Dharma teachings. Now, the teachings that I've given have by no means been perfect. I feel especially this year that I've been distracted by other things, and I've had little chance I haven't had as much of a chance to go through things in as much detail. And I know that I've made mistakes as I've taught, and some of them I've corrected. Some of them I haven't, and I'm sorry about that. So I'd like to apologize to you for all of those problems in my own teaching. And also, we are at this monastery here in Canada, we're not computer geeks. I used to think when I went to Nepal first in 2002, because I could, use a word processor and some software, I was the official computer geek of the monastery for a few years. But I think I'm losing my skills. And so I don't have enough technical skills to really make everything work well. And so there have been technical problems as well. And so I apologize for all of those difficulties and problems. But now we're kind of coming to the end of the class. And so being the end of the class, should really thank a few people who have made this possible. And although I'm the one who's sitting up here blathering on for such a long time every day, we really have to thank the people whom we haven't seen. This includes Dungse Lama Pema, who is the abbot and the head the head of this Trango Monastery, Canada, not only for taking me in and putting up with me and taking good care of me for the last 16 months that I've been here, but also for making it possible and supporting this. And this also includes Lama Surya. Lama Surya is the one that you haven't seen, who has been taking care of our Zoom connection and making sure that everything goes on the internet, on YouTube. Also, Lopin Sangpo, and Marta, Marta Ng, who works in our office, have worked hard. So, and everyone else here in the Trango Monastery, Canada, I'd like to thank them all very much. I'd also like to thank Karma Chula, who has been helping me with the Nama Buddha Tibetan language program for many years. But of course, we've had many problems with holding classes in Nama Buddha. Earthquakes and pandemics make it hard to have classes in Nepal sometimes. But she has been very helpful over the years. And so I appreciate everything she has done, not only this year, but also over the past few years. Many of you have had email correspondence with her as well. So that is more or less it for me. I think I understand that the monastery would like to make an offering. And also I'd like to say one thing. Yesterday, someone asked about making offerings to this, and I mentioned making offerings to the Trango Monastery organizations. I should have also mentioned that you can make offerings to the Trango Monastery, Canada, if you are in Canada or wherever, because that's another Trango Monastery organization that supports me. So that's just one other thing I wanted to say, in addition to the other charities of Trango Monastery. So, so thank you all very much. And I think we have something. I'm not exactly sure how it's going to work. I know they've got things prepared. Well, I think we have to go get people who are going to help out, who are not here right yet. So just, I guess that means does that mean I have to keep speaking for a few moments until people are going? Do we have fear of dead air? I see some people holding up katas in their screens on YouTube, so thank you very much. But again, it's really more all of you. So next year, I guess I will keep filling up the data here. Next year, we'll try to hold another course. If possible, we'll do it in Namo Buddha, but wherever we hold it, I think we have learned the lesson that we need to continue to broadcast things over the internet for people who just aren't otherwise to come. So I look forward to continuing to try to share what little bit I know, imperfectly as it is, but to help it out. So thank you very much. Okay. Okay. Oh, so we just have to wait a moment. Okay, so they're going to, Dungse Lama Pema would like to say a few words, so we have to wait until he is able to log on, and then we will continue. This is the way things go in monasteries. We have Tibetans and things. Sometimes things go smoothly and sometimes we have difficulties. So today is one of those days when we're having difficulties. I guess while Lama Pema is coming, when he manages to get on, until then, we've had people actually, one of the benefits of doing this over the internet is that we have had people listening on almost all of the major continents. Some of you are in North America, some of you are in South America, some of you are in Europe. Asia, I don't know of anyone who's listening simultaneously in Asia, but I'm sure there are people in Asia who are listening. So and we have people in Africa. So the only continent that is left out is Antarctica, as far as I can tell. So I don't know if there is someone on Antarctica who is listening, then we would be reaching all the major continents in the world. And so that would have been nice. Not for me, but because the teachings are spreading. It's really a great sign of the teachings. So Lama Pema is here. And so Lama will speak. And so I think actually the best way for Lama to speak would be to come close to this microphone. Okay, let me see. We'll do it this way. We're doing it the low-tech way. Okay. Oh, nice. You'd like to show both of us. Okay.
Any number tamala somebody touched the show the chapchik and then around to Tajan Namla Mendo Kanapobil Hagal and in the Jiniki Jamne Japja Tongurum Chola, which I went to song any number language tamala any Kimokamachumbeg in Zugin Zindala and number tamalo the Zindalen Namada. And in Changu can be a subject number Tamala, somebody touched the issue, yes.
So I'd like to say greetings and welcome to all of you. So first, after prostrating with deep respect to our refuge and protector in this life and future lives, Kenshin Trungpa Rinpoche, I would like to offer my welcomes and greetings and thank yous to all of you who are listening to these teachings by Khenpo Karma Chipel on the Treasury of Abhidharma.
Teni zo de da lo yini kin ze shabi tangana Abhidharma sanamendo zo de teni namba zo Khenpo chogi ani ni dong chugu lola zenda tangbo de teni le pa tamle chelongo tu ani di chelan zenda nipa de nani ni dong tambi lola pa de ngana zo chula kalongo tu ani talo tamaki zenda tamadela ni dong ni chachila de gochu tu zambalaya ani Khenpo ngune minyam chung chede ngakya meba pe mi kasore Khenpo ngune tane nga shimne ngemane na shira shimanyu imba na da tela lo dawa mangbo shide de ga cholamre kanji to ne yakpo jin de nang ne Khenpo ge kuga zeme nangba de chale nangba de chir sangye ki temba en chiradu tene ngaranzu Japja Tongurumichi, Gonglu Chimbuchi Res, Unechena Rimbuchi Lodaba, then Nor Aridan, Nor America, the Europe, Asia Lodaba, Naranzo, Chigunane, Pemnane, then Rimbuchi, Chaja Chimbogi, Chu Zujibi, Shung the Mamotinangores, Imbaina Rimbuchi, Gonglu Chimbore, Tigana Shingi, Tanjamin de la Nemo, Muke, Shabada Toyim, Shila Tene, and Rimbuchi, Chigunamo Tovala Tene. 한 달에 나랑이 문에 되니 Kempo kama chombe choge rumbuchi ki shu ki activity chawa yakpo chen ze song samba ki ngarang ki dende chen chorba dende ke songs.
So the main thing here is that today, on the last day of this teaching on the Abhidharma, the text on the Abhidharma by Vasubandhu, the Treasury of Abhidharma, that Kempo Karma Triple has been giving. It started in 2019, and the first year was in 2019 in Namu Buddha. The second year was held in 2020 here in this shrine room. And so this year has been the last year, this year of 2021. And so in this, so over this time, Kempo has really been, I'm not sure if this is true, but we'll see. Kempo says, Lama says that I have been humble, show a great desire for the Dharma practice and have little pride. I'm really not sure about that one. So before then, sorry, I shouldn't make these comments, but it's hard not to. So before then, I had not really known Kempo, but over the past many months that he has been here, I've come to see how hardworking he is on the behalf of spreading the teachings of Buddhism, and particularly those of Kempo Trungpa Rinpoche. So in particular, Khenchen Trungpa Rinpoche has come to a very old age. And really, actually, he usually travels every year to North America, to Asia, to Europe, and has given many teachings on Mahamudra and so forth. But now Rinpoche has grown very old, and especially with the conflict and famine, and especially with the coronavirus in the world, he has been unable to come here. And so I really had the feeling that Kempo Karma Triple has been really continuing to propagate the Dharma activity of Khenchen Trungpa Rinpoche.
Tene diga nashingi ta namba tso chiki kasa Kempo ta karasa ngaranzo inji insegor inji. Tene rinpochi ki ta inji ki mila inji ki Kempo. Kyamin dendola kyami ki Kempo. Han peba dendola peba ki Kempo. Rukpa dendola rukpa ki Kempo. Ta tingsan peyu mi na peyu ki Kempo jene kiri koro korongi ta ngaranzo tongo kumba ki rinpochi katin la tene mirik chazang la Kempo dene nangwa la tene sososo kiri dene la. Tene ngune kei kyur mago wala tene. Pena ngaranda wachi chwe she te kala nga ki inji abo mi she kei kyur che te kala kiranzo pe nyom nangdang. Ani dina shinga trowa le tukuya mara. Dene de tambala Kempo ki kaptu ma sungdi tambala kiranzo trowa kaptu dene kokab dene ngune tani. An kalwa sangwa shivuji re sangwa dos. Himba ina da ngarangi shivuji da ngaranga kyachene shik mes. North America la Kempo ngune tsulim zangma imba. Tene diga nangshingi nang changju sem chi sosoro tamba sange nga ki tomba tene yakbo sungi miji ki tsaani tene kiranzo imbana chö shuya koka paragwa diga nangshingi zuyo ngoni shubha tene chi shuya ragwa de ngana sambande North America la tang dangbo trawa chi yure samsan trawa chi kiri kapto ton tang dangbo chi in samsan trawa tene changi doos.
So when we talk about Kempos, actually, in our Trungpa monastery, we have a Western Kempo, an English-speaking Kempo for English speakers. We have a Chinese Kempo for the Chinese speakers. We have Tibetan Kempos for the Tibetan speakers. We have Bhutanese Kempos for the Bhutanese speakers. And we have Nepali Kempos for who can teach in Nepali for the Nepali speakers. And so this is actually one of the wonderful things that Trungpa Rinpoche has done. In our Trungpa monastery, we have Kempos who are able to teach in languages so that people can hear them directly without any translation. For example, if I were to teach you, my English isn't very good. And I'd have to have a translator, and it'd be boring for all of you and difficult to make a direct connection. But with Kempo teaching, it's a little bit different because he is able to speak directly to you in a language you understand. And I think this is really extremely fortunate. And not only that, to have, and this isn't saying this out of pride, It's to have a Kempo who is really as diligent about the teachings, who has practices pure discipline, who has the discipline of the internal discipline of the bodhisattva, of the external discipline of the pratimoksha, and the secret discipline of the tantra vows. To find a Kempo who is going to teach this, to have an opportunity to receive dharma from that is from someone like that is rare, and in particular to have someone who is going to teach the Abhidharma, the Treasury of Abhidharma, from beginning to end. I think that this is probably the first time that we've had an opportunity to receive teachings on this text from beginning to end in our own language.
Okay, then I don't have to say a lot of things. And usually anytime Kempo teach, they will monastery over some red and blue, any gift, and Kempo didn't accept. And today we are going a small gift for body, mind, speech for Kempo long life, and we are a small gift for Kempola. And I'm sorry for wait for a long time because and usually we had same account for monastery Zoom meeting. Today I don't know something problem for technologies and everybody. I'm sorry for these things, and we are going to open day after tomorrow, July 25th. Our monastery is become 11 years old, and 2010 July 25th. There was in Gombopa's, Anavast Gombopa's enlightenment, Parinimana's day, and tomorrow Tibetan calendar, and tomorrow is our Gombopa's Parinimana's day, and but this year, one day late, and day after tomorrow, we're going to open monastery, and we are going to pray for the fire puja. We hope, and some our members almost 2 years they didn't come to monastery. They send me a lot of message. Oh, we miss monastery, and we hope and everybody going well. And our Rinpoche is a long life, and all the Rinpoche's students, everybody getting together in our monastery next time. And thank you so much, and continue to practice on Kempo's all the teaching we after in the Tongu Monastery YouTube. And every day I check YouTube, how many people are watching. I also practicing English Kempo's teaching, and I just come back from Nepal 2 weeks ago, and I finished quarantine, and the Rinpoche is very well. Rinpoche already take the 2 vaccine, and this year Rinpoche going to be 90 years old, and such a long life. And all the Rinpoches attending Lobsang Doches, other attendant take care very well every week. And the Rinpoches 2 times transformation, Mahamata's transformation. And if you like to join, then Kempo helps all the Zoom meetings, IT. And thank you very much, and long life, our Rinpoche, nice touch the lake. Now we can, Lo and Sambo going to prayer for Mandala, and everybody prayer Mandala together, okay? Thank you very much. See you soon. Thank you.
Tanya Chembola de Barayuro, Jozo, Bodo, Cheze, Shabada, Jezo, Iran, Gaje, Sohai, Gewa, Jose, Lage, Jezo, Lage, Lage, Jazo, Shiremo. That's what they have offered me, so very kind. Thank you.
Thank you, thank you, thank you.
So I appreciate it. Thank you very much.
You.
I hope we all connect
Wonderful.
somehow over live or over the internet soon.
Thank you, Kepo, so much.
All right. Okay. Bye-bye.
Till we meet again.